Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Star Wars just announced that they'd canceled the Acolyte TV show. There's not going to be a season 2, no answers about several of the major cliffhangers at the end of season 1, like what's going on with Darth Plagueis. The true tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise is that we have no idea what he was going to do with Chimere and Osha. What was the unspoken history between Chimere and Vernestra Rwoh? What was going on with David Harewood's Senator Raincourt character? What was going on with the Vergence in the Force? And what, if anything, about all this in the Sith did Yoda know, and when did he know? That's just a taste of some of the cliffhangers that are now joining that same graveyard as those Marvel movie post-credit scenes that go nowhere because their sequels got canceled. It's kind of turned into a meme the last few years with all the different movies and shows being canceled by Star Wars and Marvel over at Disney. It has been a bloodbath the last couple of years. So we'll explain what happened with the Acolyte specifically and what's happening with Star Wars as a whole just in general, because it sort of represents a larger shift in Star Wars priorities, where they're spending all their money and all their energy. But the only real tea that I have to spill on the series is that apparently Leslie Halen, the actual showrunner, had a much better sounding version of the show that she wanted to make, but that Lucasfilm was afraid to make. Like, she actually wanted to make the Sith-based show that we were all pitched that we were going to get. But apparently Lucasfilm was afraid of actually doing a show about Sith characters, which is why we had to spend most of season 1 with the Force Witches and them spinning their wheels with the sisters, and then leading up to the idea that eventually Osha would become Sith eventually. Ending the show with a bunch of ideas that made it seem like season 2 would have been much, much better than season 1. So it sounds like originally the plan for season 1 was what they were going to be doing during season 2. I don't know why they were afraid of leading with the good stuff. Like, why don't you just start with the good stuff? But right now, Star Wars is in their big push back to the movies with The Mandalorian and Grogu. There was a brand new trailer for that at D23. I did a much longer breakdown video of it last week, so I'll link that at the end of this and down in the description below. Starting with the big stuff first, R.I.P. to The Acolyte, another one-season show from Star Wars. There's a lot you can say about why the show failed on a story level, on a character level. Like, there were just a couple things that just did not work. But the first big reason why it got canceled should be obvious, and it's budget. It's all about money. Like, that's all these big corporations really care about. They don't care about the fans, they care about money. If you didn't follow development on the series, it had a reported budget of around $190 million, and according to Deadline and Nielsen, ratings for the series, like the viewership, cratered after the first couple of episodes. Like, it started strong, then just absolutely petered off, which is not what you want to see when you're spending more money than you expected to spend on a series, which is vastly more expensive than what Disney said they wanted to spend on all these different Disney Plus series. We actually got some details about this from Kevin Feige over at Marvel. Back when Disney Plus launched in 2019 with The Mandalorian, Kevin Feige around that time was launching a lot of his Marvel series on Disney Plus. Disney's larger goal, he said, was to keep their budgets for the series around $150 million apiece. That's why you had some series that were like 45 minutes and 6 episodes, and then the longer series that were like 8 to 9 episodes being more like 30 minutes long. All because that was them just stretching that same $150 million across that amount of time. But the reported budget of The Mandalorian Season 1 was only $120 million, meaning that it was a bargain by their standards. And keep in mind, this was also developed with the volume technology for Season 1. That was the beginning of them using that special style of filming, like a lot of that technology, really expensive, so that was wrapped up in the budget of Season 1. The Mandalorian series popped off, everybody loved it. Grogu turned into a huge meme early on, which helped the series penetrate larger pop culture, get people who normally didn't care about Star Wars to care about Star Wars again, when Rise of Skywalker was doing everything it could to make people hate Star Wars. Around that same time, Disney CEO Bob Iger gives his infamous Star Wars and Marvel big edict to crank up their output to crazy levels, hoping that the steady stream of Star Wars and Marvel shows on Disney Plus over the next several years will sustain their subscriber numbers and make Disney Plus a profitable streaming service. We all saw what happened after that, like, wait for the other shoe to drop, big crash from all the streaming networks, not just from Disney, but also HBO Max. Like, everybody just did terribly. It was a good example of the fallacy that if you just slap a popular name on something like DC, Star Wars, Marvel, it doesn't automatically mean that people will watch it and enjoy it and continue to pay subscription money to these services, which was also increasing year to year. Like, the subscription prices go up and up and up every year. So it should be obvious your shows have to actually be good. With this crazy output, Star Wars and Marvel just couldn't control their quality, and we saw how that ended. Secret Invasion is a prime example of quantity over quality. Kevin Feige very publicly pulled way back on the number of releases, like Deadpool and Wolverine, the only movie that they're releasing this year, and they pulled way back on the number of TV series they were releasing, enabling them to do the quality control that they needed so that they would only be releasing bangers. Over on the Star Wars side of things, it seemed like Mando was cooking. Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni were the saviors of the Star Wars brand in the wake of The Rise of Skywalker. Like, they will save Star Wars. But if you remember that Disney Plus Day announcement bonanza back in 2020 when Marvel and DC announced a billion different projects, this was like when Bob Iger was forcing their output out to like crazy levels. Most of the stuff on the Star Wars board here has since been canceled. Like, the only stuff that survived was the Mando and related stuff like Ahsoka, which is a spin-off of The Mandalorian. Dave Filoni makes it. They're in the middle of working on season 2 right now. Andor, also probably one of the best things that Star Wars has done in recent years. The animated stuff like Bad Batch was also from Dave Filoni. The Vision series did make it to a season 2. But that's pretty much it. A lot of the rest are either outright canceled, like never actually made it to episodes, or were one and done seasons, got canceled after season 1. A lot of times the nice way that they've said this in the past is that they only planned on stuff to be season 1. Like, oh, we wanted this to be a limited series from the beginning, but that's not true. Like, if it had done well enough, they would have done multiple seasons of everything. So I think clearly at the time, like this is back in 2020, they had absolutely no idea where Star Wars needed to go creatively and were just shotgunning stuff at the wall to see what stuck. This is why in present day, the first movie that they're releasing in theaters in years is going to be The Mandalorian and Grogu, because it's their strongest show right now, like the most popular thing that they make. So of course they're going to lead with that. Like, let's just do a movie for the most popular thing we have. Getting to the second major reason why The Acolyte was canceled. It was originally supposed to be the main Star Wars TV show after The Mandalorian finished its run on TV. Like, that's the way they went into marketing season 1 of The Acolyte. Like, we know the Mando is going to turn into a movie franchise now with The Mandalorian and Grogu. We need like a main TV show to anchor our schedule, and they were pitching that as The Acolyte. If it wasn't clear, I talked about this in some of my Mando and Grogu movie videos, but essentially that movie was their planned plot for season 4 of The Mandalorian. So they're doing the movie instead of doing it as a TV show. So originally the Mando part of the timeline was like the main part of the timeline that they were focusing all their time and energy on. But since that's moving to the movies, they need like a TV show to anchor their schedule. And The Acolyte was meant to be their big push into the High Republic era in the live action stuff. So part of the idea is that as Mando moved into the movies, we'd be watching all the High Republic stuff on TV, and there'd be more spin-offs during that part of the timeline. Like, they just developed that part of the timeline more. So if you haven't been reading the High Republic comics and books, it was sort of like a Shadows of the Empire style push from Star Wars to do a larger story universe set during a totally new part of the timeline that they hadn't covered in previous games, books, or TV shows. Sort of the way Shadows of the Empire was like a story universe set during a specific part of the timeline during the 90s. Now, I don't know what the book sales numbers are for the High Republic stuff, or like how that stuff is doing for Lucasfilm in general, but on top of a lot of the criticisms of the characters and the story of The Acolyte, them canceling the series is another indicator that they changed their minds at Star Wars about shifting the live-action shows and movies to the High Republic era part of the timeline. Now it just sounds like they're sort of tying that part of the timeline off and letting them finish the story in the books like they'd originally planned it. I do not think they have any more animated shows or live-action shows that will take place during the High Republic era, or like any movie plans during that part of the timeline. In favor of, number 3, positioning Ahsoka as the new main TV show that they're focusing on that will fill the gap years between movies for the time being. Like The Mandalorian shifts to the movies, Ahsoka is basically taking its place as the main TV show. I also think this is a larger part of Star Wars in general, just doubling down on Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau creatively, because Jon Favreau is directing the Mandalorian Grogu movie, so they're sort of banking on him as Star Wars to reinvigorate the brand again. Like, after doing it with Mando Season 1, they're like, could you please do this, but with the movies? Dave Filoni is still directing the Thrawn movie, which is like another big part of the timeline that they were pitching a couple years ago. That was originally going to be like the next big movie before they announced The Mandalorian and Grogu. It sounds like Mando and Grogu is sort of them making the safe bet before they try the Thrawn movie, because the reception on Thrawn was so tepid. But it all just boils down to the fact that Star Wars in general is way more invested with those two guys and everything that they're doing in that part of the timeline. For example, the Skeleton Crew show with Jude Law that's coming later this year. Like, I just did a big trailer video for it, so I'll post a link down in the description. That is meant to be another Mandalorian spin-off. It takes place after The Mandalorian Season 3. Those characters were originally supposed to cross over with the Mando characters in the Thrawn movie. Those plans could have shifted now because the way their movie plans have all changed a little bit. But you can kind of see the way the wind is blowing at Star Wars, and it's blowing in a Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni direction. If it wasn't already, it's blowing in their direction even more now. They're tightening budgets on all their different stuff. So like a lot of the fringe projects and stuff that they were just going to try out, like, this sounds like a fun idea. Maybe we'll throw some money at this. They're not doing that kind of thing anymore, and they're just focusing on the most popular stuff that they have and doubling down on that. As for how they wrap up the cliffhangers on the Acolyte series, I think based on what the showrunner said about the character arcs, it's enough to pick out where they were headed with most of these storylines. Darth Plagueis the Wise was very clearly more interested in Osha than Qimir, who was his current apprentice. They said they were trying to work within the rule of two. They weren't going to outright break that, which I think means that Darth Plagueis would have continued to have Qimir as his official apprentice, and Osha would have just been called the ... wait for it, Acolyte, thus the name of the show, as a way around him having two apprentices at the same time. Like, an acolyte is a different idea than being an apprentice. Darth Plagueis really only cared about the virgins in the Force and Osha's potential for power because they would have probably used Osha's creation in the Force, the way she and her sister May were born as a single person then split into two using the Force, to explain how Darth Plagueis learned to manipulate the midichlorians to create life, stop death, generally became way more powerful the way that Palpatine talked about him during Revenge of the Sith. At a certain point, he probably would have killed Qimir or gotten Osha to do it to further her descent into the dark side, so R.I.P. Qimir. And somehow Palpatine returned, like post all the memes. The showrunner did say that eventually we'd see a young version of Palpatine. But because the series took place 100 years before Phantom Menace, and Palpatine was in his early 50s at the beginning of that movie, the only way that works is that there was a huge time jump in future seasons. Like, Osha and May would have had to either been very old when Palpatine shows up, or they'd have to bent over backwards to explain why they still look young and say that it was part of their power keeping them young. Either way, it presents a big problem. Like, they have to bend time and space. They did that during the series a couple times, though, where they're like, can't this person who was there later in the canon just be there earlier and we just say that they were there earlier? A lot of hand-waving when it came to when certain characters were in certain places. Darth Plagueis then continues his plan from the canon to take down the Jedi Order using the Senate and the Republic, like his long-term Sith plan that's been going on for hundreds of years. It was a plan that started before Darth Plagueis came along, and he just became his plan at a certain point. Canonically, Plagueis was the person who helped Palpatine get into the Senate when he was younger, basically foster his political career because Plagueis was part of the banking clan, like he was very rich. So the whole Order 66 of it all, like the long-term Sith plan to take down the Jedi, really became a big thing under Plagueis, and Palpatine just made it his own plan after he killed Plagueis. Also, because Palpatine comes along eventually and takes power, that would also mean that he probably wound up killing Osha at a certain point, and May as well too. So RIP to both of them. As for Qimir's history with Vernestra Rwoh, I think it was very clear from Season 1 that he used to be her Padawan. He had some tragic backstory before he became a Jedi at the temple. His biological family were probably killed in some gruesome fashion. It sounds like his backstory was similar to May and Osha's, like he couldn't get past that darkness within him. Eventually, he wound up fighting Vernestra Rwoh, his master, who thought that she had killed him, but he escaped with that scar from her lightsaber whip on his back, and at some point found Darth Plagueis and began training with him. They would have probably had a Vernestra Rwoh and Qimir rematch fight. Ultimately, I think he would have killed her. She was such a shady character on the series, hiding all those past misdeeds from Yoda, the Jedi Council. It just seems like she had been marked for death early on, like they wanted to let you know, no, she is not going to survive this. As for David Harewood's Senator Raincourt, I think they initially wanted you to wonder if he was Sith, but because of what they revealed with Darth Plagueis and Qimir and all that stuff, I think that he's just working with Darth Plagueis. That's kind of the deal with a lot of the politicians in the Star Wars universe, like they're somewhat corrupt, like you offer them more political power and they'll just do whatever you say. So it sounds like Plagueis was feeding a lot of information about the Jedi that hurt them to Senator Raincourt, helping his rise in the Senate. As for that end tag scene with Yoda, big question about what he was going to do about all this. Vernestra Rose seemed like she was finally going to come clean about all the shady stuff that happened with the Force Witches on Brendok. Personally, I found it hard to believe that Yoda didn't know about the virgins in the Force because it seemed like a huge plot point on the series that they wanted to prove that it existed, and that's what ultimately led to a lot of the deaths. Like, no, we have to prove that this Force virgins is an actual thing. It's a huge deal. When normally you think that all Yoda would have to do is just fly a ship into proximity of the planet and he would feel the power in the Force. Like, oh yeah, there's clearly something going on here. So it just seemed like the series kept having to find ways to keep characters in the dark, like, no, we can't have them know about this stuff because it'll destroy the plot of the series. They also had the issue with them wanting to maintain the plot point in Phantom Menace with the line that the Jedi Council didn't believe the Sith could be around because they thought they'd been dormant for the last 1,000 years. So I think in service of maintaining that plot point, Yoda would have never learned about Darth Plagueis and Vernestra Rose. When she did learn about him, it would have been after going to the secret Sith planet where they were all training, where Chimere was. She probably would have learned what was really going on with Darth Plagueis there, had a rematch fight with Chimere, but then lost and been killed before she had time to tell any of the other Jedi about it. The only way you keep the secret of the Sith is if all the characters who learn about it either die or become Sith themselves, which is like the case with Osha. So RIP to anybody on the series that at any point learned that the Sith were back, that Darth Plagueis was an actual thing. Basically, that's what was in store for the Acolyte, like in future seasons. Like, had it continued to season 2, season 3, they would have basically just played those storylines out. What's next for Star Wars right now, though, is the Skeleton Crew episodes later this year. I've already talked about that, crossing over with the Mandalorian stuff, the Ahsoka part of the timeline, too. We have Andor Season 2 episodes next year. I do have a trailer video for that. I might do like a trailer breakdown at some point. Maybe we'll get Ahsoka Season 2 episodes at the end of next year, too, just depending on how fast they move. Then the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is coming out May 2026 right now. The funny thing about that is it's the same time they're supposed to release Avengers 5 Doomsday with Robert Downey Jr. coming back as that version of Doctor Doom. You can bet money on the fact that they will not release a Star Wars movie and an Avengers movie at the same time. Like, that would be crazy. One of those movies is going to move by at least a couple weeks. It's probably going to be Star Wars. I've already done a much bigger trailer video for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Click here to watch that, and click here for my Ahsoka Season 2 teaser. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.